Let me show you the AI infrastructure we use to power and grow over $100 million in Amazon revenue. We connected Claude to our entire business. One of our brands was stuck at $2.1 million a year. The system found why, acted on it, and grew it to $2.5 million a year on lower ad spend. And that's just one example. Most brands are already quote unquote using AI. They draft emails with it, they brainstorm with it, they paste in a spreadsheet and ask it what it thinks, and they feel like they're keeping up. The truth is they're not. And that's level 0 4. And the gap between level 0 and level 3 is not intelligence, it's something most people never fix. So in this video, I'll show you the 4 levels of AI in a business and where you actually are. Then the 3 layers of our system, the data, the agents, and the human, and how to start building your version at your size. Plus, the one safety setting you must configure before you ever connect AI to your data, or you could end up wasting tens of thousands of dollars. Let's start with the levels because you need to know where you're standing. So these are the high level, the 4 levels of AI. I'm going to jump into each one more specifically. And the most important thing as you go through this is to be honest of where your team stands, because you have to understand where you are today to know what's needed to get to the next step. So high level, the first one is just using AI like a glorified search engine. You just put in, ask it, basically like a more advanced Google. Actually, now Google even has Gemini, right? So it's not doing much. The second one is more of an advisor basis. So this is where you're kind of consulting on some stuff specifically. Then an assistant, it's doing some work with you. And then the third level is where you truly get to the next step and you start using it to automate things. A lot of this I actually got from Dan Martell, and implementing his AI systems into e-commerce has been very, very helpful. And this is how I basically built the presentation. So the first thing is you have to understand AI, just like any system in human history. I mean, whether it's data, whether it's an ERP, whatever it is, even an employee. The saying is, this is kind of the PC version, but garbage in, garbage out. So whatever you put in employee, if you train him like crap, he's not going to turn out any good, right? And the same thing for data. If you put in wrong data, you get bad data out. And that goes for AI. It's the same as any other system or technology, where the better inputs you have, the better outputs you get. And that's where the precipice of what we're going to get into basically is that we're looking at giving it the best, most reliable data to get the best, most reliable outcomes. And that's what I walked through in this video. And that's where 90% of people are stuck at level 0. They're just, okay, what do you think of this email? What do you think of this response? Or how much did Amazon sell on Prime Day? Very basic prompts, and they're not using AI to its most capability. And they're stuck because of the reason that we just mentioned in the data. So this is where we get to level 1 and we start using it as an advisor. A very simple version of this is to have a file that has context, uploading it. A very old version of this, right? If you remember, there was a thing as prompt engineering. Now it's not as relevant because AI has moved much past that. But a very good prompt would basically mean that you're using as a prompt because you're loading it with context, right? And all of this, the difference between all the layers and levels is just the amount of context and data that you load into AI. So this is a more advanced of a file or a prompt is obviously a project. So Claude project, where you open a file, you upload your files in there, you upload instructions. That's even a better version of the advisor, because then it continuously has that context. And the more live you make that files, and the more live you make the data and the instructions, the better the output will be. So that's using it as an advisor. Again, I use this very often. Claude projects is the most common version of this. The next step is where AI works with you, right? We go from, initially we started at glorified search engine, then advisor, and now we're using it as an assistant. And the way that AI works with you, a very common example of this is Claude Skills. Another one is, for example, using Claude in Chrome, right? You have the Chrome extension. Manus also has a Chrome extension that's really good if we wanted to get into that. But another example is obviously Claude Cowork, and that's one of the most famous examples where AI is literally going into browsers, it's doing things on your behalf, and you're using it as an assistant. And this is if you got to this level, that's still very advanced, and it's very, very helpful in here. I mean, just one use case, right? I'm traveling to a few trade shows. I gave Claude Cowork my trade show schedule, and it automatically made a map of the best flights, best price. I put the parameters. For example, for me, I wanted to be price effective on one, but the other one I needed to be there in a certain time because I had 2 meetings. So I gave it that parameters, and I used, for example, a Letterly to speak to it, and then that's where I got that schedule in this case. That's a very high level example. We're going to get into more technical examples related to brands, but just understanding what that looks like in this case. So that's AI doing work with you. And then the next example, and this is the final and most advanced example, is AI doing the work itself, right? And this is where you're getting to automation, you're building agents, you request an event or schedule, agents follow the SOP basically. It's going through all of the steps on its own. A famous example is obviously Claude Code. Replit is also pretty famous where it can build agents and going in through it. But I just wanted to give a high-level overview just so you can properly analyze how far along the lines you are, just to know where you're starting off from, and to also, when you get further in the video, to tell you what it takes to truly get to the next level of AI and to get that advanced. So the biggest gap between all of these levels is the context, not the intelligence. The same Claude chat that you're using as a search engine, it uses Fable 5 or so on. The same model used there is used on Claude Cowork, right? Claude is the same level of intelligence. It's the same model. People are focused on the model. The truth is, the difference is the context and data that you're giving it to produce those outcomes. So that's a very, very important context as we go through this, to understand the differentiating factor is not the intelligence of the AI you're interacting with, rather the data that you're providing it. And I'll walk into how to provide it the good data, which is the data layer, right? That's pillar 2 that are very important to talk about, is where you're uploading these sources, and where does your business data actually live, right? Is it scattered across everywhere, or is it actually unified in a single source of truth, right? And this is where your data's context is trapped in many different interfaces, whether that's Amazon Seller Central, your Shopify dashboard, Walmart Marketplace, your factory orders, a Google Sheets here, a Microsoft Excel sheet there, a Docs there. Everything is in a different place. And that's where you have to consolidate that data, either by, for example, in a project, one cool thing you can do is instead of uploading a Word document, you can upload a Google Doc. So that way, when you upload the doc, the project gets updated, right? That's a way of keeping the data live. A more advanced layer of this is what we're going to get into very shortly, is basically doing a data warehouse, right? And this is where you dump all of your different data, and this is the true unlock for us, is dumping all of our various data sources into a single data warehouse that has all of our places. And I don't want to complicate what a data warehouse is, even going back to this graphic right here, is basically we have different sources, right? Different data sources using a pipeline. So using just like a water pipeline, but this is a data pipeline dumping into a data warehouse. So just like a 3PL warehouse that has inventory, this is a data warehouse that has data, right? And all of that living in one place to facilitate and to store all of your data, and to also have it uploaded live, because the pipeline, it's just like water continuously runs through it, data continuously runs through it with the latest events, and it's all being dumped into one place, and that is a source of truth. So across every brand, across every marketplace, you have everything dumped into one place, and this is where the true game changer for us is that Claude can now connect to that data warehouse. There's a BigQuery connection, and when we did that, we truly revealed insights that were very much a game changer for our organization, for our business. You don't need to copy paste. It's just a straight MCP connection. We just had to log in. There is a very important safety valve that I'm going to mention later to make sure that you don't spend so much money on wasting tokens and usage. But this is, we uploaded that connection. Basically, BigQuery was where our data warehouse lives. So that's where it now has that source connected to it. And this is where we started using Claude and asking it business questions rather than data questions, just, literally conversationally. So for example, we had a brand that reduced approximately 10% in sales. And we wanted to, instead of the old way, just going to Seller Central and looking at SQP and brand analytics, now I'm talking to the data directly. What happened with this sale? Why did it reduce 10%? And what it turned out was that it told us that the reason that it dropped was the sessions. The session went down 40% approximately. Okay, that's obviously going to have impact, because thankfully CTR and CVR went up. It made up for the sessions reduction. So understanding the sessions, I understood that our product was actually classified, and I did a deeper dive, and this wasn't myself, it was the catalog team. They were explaining the issue, was that it was changed into another category. So when we understood that that category, the rank there is much less than the rank here, Amazon automatically routed it. We changed it back in. So just going through that, the exercise took 5 minutes. In the past, it would have taken 2 or 3 days, because you have to check one area, then another area. But now everything is all connected together, and it was a huge game changer. And this is the very, very important step, is that you have to have a safety valve. For us, when we set up the BigQuery to Claude connection, we did it all under the same user. We did, the user did was Claude_data_user@Voadera.com. And the reason we did that is we wanted to limit the usage, because you can easily ask a vague question to Claude, say like, okay, how was my performance last year? And it's gonna look through all your data and go everywhere and just get lost. Because for us, we have millions and millions of transactions, millions of data inputs. Imagine how much not only the Claude tokens usage, right, can use, but also on the other hand, the Google Cloud platform, GCP, how much usage is going to have from there. And that could rack up easily. So what we did is we attached, I think it was like a $200 limit to that specific email user a month. So once you reached it, we got a flag. Do you want to continue? Sometimes we override it and continue. Other times we see why it's being used so much. Are we asking vague questions? But now we have a source for a specific domain where we can restrain the spend. And this is very, very important. So this is kind of what it looks like at a high level, right? You have all the inputs, Amazon, Walmart, Shopify. You have a safety valve for two reasons. One, the permissions, and this is actually a very important point, but two, also the money usage, because this specific user, Claude_data_user, it's only read access to our data. It doesn't have write access, because we don't want to also Claude to accidentally change the settings on our main data warehouse, because that's where our partners see their data. Everyone sees their data, so we want to make sure that that stays accurate. But then the other reason is so that our dollar usage doesn't go up. So this is a very, very important step, the safety valve, again, for the two reasons I mentioned. And then that's where we have Claude talking to it. And now we're getting insights and analysis. Not only are we surfacing them quickly, but also Claude is giving us our take on it. For example, one of the things that we did is we noticed that CVR, in a certain, like we asked it why there was a certain product lagging behind compared to its other products in the portfolio, and it realized that that image stack didn't have a video and the other ones did. We didn't upload the file there. That catalog had like 100 SKUs, but it looked at the image stack, it saw all of them had 7 images and a video, and it was all a data input. And just looking at that quickly and being able to update it was a game changer, and it really is. I mean, it's been one of the more helpful things. And also, one thing to understand is that not all just because data is there doesn't mean that it's available. One thing that you have to understand is, like, you have to make the data legible to read. There's different identifiers. Just one example is currency, right? You have Canada and US. So you have to clean the data to make sure that you can read it. So once you dump the data to the data warehouse, again, this is where you have like a data engineer team. I don't want to get into the mechanics of that. The main thing was talking about this BigQuery to Claude connection. But this is just a disclaimer to keep in mind as you do this. So that's where you standardize the events. You make sure every order registers the same, because each platform, for example, Walmart, has different names for different things. Amazon has an ASIN, Walmart doesn't have an ASIN, right? That comes into the data warehouse. They don't know what to do with that because it's now two conflating things. So you have to make sure you standardize it so all the data speaks the same language. So that's where the AI doesn't get confused, because again, you're using this as a source of truth. So you want to make sure that the input is as clean as possible and as accurate and as consistent as possible, so that the output you get is, again, as legible and legitimate as possible as well. And this is where portfolios become comparable. We can compare certain brands to other brands and categories. We're developing benchmarks. What's a healthy CTR in a certain category? What's a healthy CVR for a certain category? And then we're seeing if something is lagging, we look at best practices. So, and then it'll tell us the third image here is a lifestyle image. The third image isn't a lifestyle image. It checks for premium A+ content in bulk. It's doing all of this in bulk and speed. Again, we were doing this before, but now the speed and insights layer is just added on top of everything to give it the other insight. So again, make sure that your data is clean. If you add scale as things are not consistent, you're gonna scale a process that's bad, and it's gonna become just worse. So you want to make sure that you're building AI on top of something that's legitimate and on top of something that's useful, rather than something that is not going to be helpful long term. And everything, this is where when we get a new brand, it automatically, like, it checks it against existing role. And that's why, for example, we just onboarded a brand lately. we automatically ran it against the benchmarks. We automatically ran it against all of our existing data, and we have millions of data points to see what's needed for this one. And that's whether it's PPC data, for example, the latest trending in that category based on comparable niches, the average spend on a certain keyword, how much to do auto for example. One of the things we like to do auto, this is just one of the insights, this is currently, right, is we found that 30 to 40% for a new campaign to get the good keywords, and then we scale to 20%, and that's where we found the most effective tacos to be at. And we found the range 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So when you get a new brand, it leverages those millions of data points, so we can get at that growth that we try to be at 30 to 40% year over year for our brands. And again, if you want this to leverage this for your brand, come check us out at Voadera.com, apply for a strategy call, see if you qualify, and make sure to like these videos if these are helpful so I can make more of them. But that's where all the existing brands, it kind of adds to the power of the proprietariness of this AI, because further, it's kind of a self-fulfilling loop where it's a flywheel cycle, right? Because the more data, better results give us better outcomes gives us more brands, more data, and it kind of goes in a process, and it really helps everything to do it. So again, standardizing events, you want to make sure everything looks clean, organized, legible for the outputs. And then this is where we build the agent layer. Once we get that data connection clean, once we clean the data, once we organize the data, once we have it in there, now we can start thinking about agents, automations, and it becomes much more effective. Again, you can do it before. It depends on what kind of agent you're building. If you're just doing an agent to check your email and to surface things, that's just an automation. It's very simple. But if you want an agent, for example, and I'll give a few examples of ours, they need more intelligence than just that. So an agent is just an SOP. It's basically as close as you can get to an employee. It does specific processes, specific outcomes. The workflow itself is a product, so that's where you have to look at the certain, and I'm going to get into this later, so I won't dive too deep into here. But this is where, again, I wanted to dive into it deeper, is don't ask yourself, okay, I have a creative specialist, and I'll give you a real life example. I have a creative specialist, okay, I want an agent to take over this job. That's not how it works. What you have to think is a creative specialist, think of their workflow, right? What are they doing? For example, they're getting the raw photo shoot image, they're uploading that into Adobe, they're producing 6 to 7 images, one is lifestyle, one is a call out, one is etc., and then they're reviewing it, and then they're uploading it. So that's way complicated. There's probably 10 or 20 steps in there. What steps of the process can AI do? That's what we think. We don't think about AI replacing the entire person. That's not realistic right now, and it's just a waste of time. Of those layers, for example, for us, what AI does is the initial draft that the creative specialist produces, we have the AI produce another 20 or 30 that we test on intelligence softwares, or we test on manager experiments in Amazon, and then we still have a human doing the quality assurance later. And that's actually going to the last point that I want to mention at the end. But that's where, instead of asking like who can AI replace, what workflows or what processes can this agent take over? And that's the way we look at it. So one workflow process, we used to upload reports manually for a dashboard. Now an agent automatically pulls the data, surfaces them, and provides the high-level insights, the good and the bad, right? And then we have that much quicker. We still have a human reviewing that at the end, but that's where it does that part. And that's where it actually helped us give insights for a brand that, for example, was doing 80,000. It helped us get up to 120,000 because we kept on looking at the bad. For example, this call out is a very high search intent item that people are asking Alexa for, and you're not having it in your images. All right, we started adding it. Then it gives us another suggestion. It's regular A+ content, it's not premium A+. That was on the bad, so we add that in. And then on the good, on the other hand, it tells us what we're doing good on. So this keyword has a high return, we add the budget for that keyword. This keyword has a low return, we reduce the budget. That's on the bad. So doing this, it actually helped one brand. The brand that I mentioned initially, you go from 2.1 million to 2.5 million, just continuously iterating on these from the marketplace intelligence and implementing what they had. But not everything is implementable. I'm going to get to this at the end. The creative specialist example, right? Producing all those examples, that's outputs that our agent did that helped us also improve CTR and conversion rate. Another one was PPC wastage. I kind of got at this earlier, but then we have a specific dashboard just for that to go over the wasted terms, what can be reshuffled, what can be re-optimized, all that kind of stuff. So you have to continuously earn the right to automate. You have to understand that once something works, you implement it. You have to have that initial check-in on it initially. So that's where, again, you have an agent, you have an SOP or checklist, right? You have agent doing it, overviewing it, looking at the outcome. And that's where the human layer is very irrelevant. I'm not going to like, oh, AI can replace your entire team and to do this clickbait title to drive clicks. I don't believe in that. It hasn't been the case for us. It increased our efficiency, increased our leverage, increased our output. And that's where it's been very, very effective for us. It made our people better. And this is where the human layer is relevant. It gives you judgment, it weighs trade-offs. Not everything the AI can do very effectively. And also it can't do the entire process I mentioned. So for example, in the first image, when I was talking about images, the raw photo shoot in the studio that we have here at our offices and warehouses, I want to buy a $10 million robot or however much it costs to do that raw image. We have a person, he does it, he uploads it to Google Drive. Why do I need to agent or automate that? The trade-off is not there. So humans are still relevant in process, but now they're doing more. That person's taking more pictures because they're doing less of other processes now that AI is taking that over, right? And that's how it kind of works in together. You have to, this is actually a very important point. This is in my Claude instructions. You can see over here, I make sure that it pushes back on certain stuff because obviously there's a big bias. This was very relevant to ChatGPT. It's getting a little bit better, but where it just wants to agree with you, so you keep on using AI more and more. So you have to be careful that that's happening. Making sure that a human can always override. One very good example why this is relevant is, first of all, I mentioned how the data is in Claude, but not all the data is there. One partner of ours was doing an ad in New York Times on the billboard, right? He got a very good slot. He got very good rates. And as they were doing the ad, we overstocked, but the AI was like, you're overstocking. The recommendation was to reduce it. The dashboard was there. We overrid that decision. We had a human layer in there, right? Because they had external data that's not in the dashboard. There's also other instances where the AI is sometimes too cut and dry or hallucinates. So you have to make sure that it's kind of like a quality assurance or double checking layer to make sure that everything is running smoothly. This is, again, the judgment is what I got into. So this is where we mentioned the AI and how it kind of works integrated with it. So this is where you have to look at your decision. You want to make sure that this is actionable. You're going into there. Outline the first thing that I would recommend doing that's helped us the most is outlining the specific workflow of what you're doing or employees doing and where AI can do it. You don't want to become an AI agent or tourist and just try a million things. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of people doing, is just doing busy work. You want to see what work you're currently doing and what AI can do on your behalf. So producing meta creative and meta ads, that's been very helpful for us. Static images, even videos, right? And producing those in bulk and seeing what's good and then scaling what's good. You have an AI meta bids that scales what's good, right? So that's where you're already doing that work. Now AI can 10x it for you. So look at your certain processes, which ones are doing. Always make sure that you're uploading as much context. At least start with the Claude project. So you're uploading those files, the Google Docs that are continuously updated, the instructions. You're even making skills, right? This is where you're getting into automation. So that way you have that context and history saved into a Claude so you can further leverage you. So looking at what that looks like, making sure that your data is as good as possible and as high as possible, right? Keeping the term simple and looking at your current process and where you can jump the data in there and which ones it can take over to help you out. If you found this video helpful, actually check out this video. I show how to use a Claude project and Claude skills specifically to enhance your brand, SEO, creative, all that kind of stuff. Check it out over here.